This is a friend's very recent Epiphone Sheraton. He bought it online. It arrived. In shipping, the headstock was broken off. A local guy glued and clamped it all back together, did some finished touch-up work, and he did a really good job on that. Now, where the break used to be is probably the strongest part of this neck. I don't know whether he did anything with the frets, and I'm going to start with the frets. The frets on this are pretty amazing for a guitar at this price point. There's no rough spots on the nibs. These have a very low and relatively wide profile, which is actually very period correct for the guitar it's emulating. It has not been my experience in days gone by that Epiphones tend to have really good frets. So it's very possible that whoever did the neck repair also dressed and leveled the frets. I can't speak for that. I can say that on this particular guitar, the relief is almost non-existent. And yet I can bend with no fretting out all over the neck. The neck itself is extraordinarily thin and kind of flat on the back. Too much so for me to enjoy this guitar enough to want to buy one. But I've got very large hands and I favor very thick necks. Of the guitars I own, the closest is that 61 SG, and its neck is thicker, especially above the first fret than this, and has more of a shoulder to it. So, if you're interested in one of these, try to play them at a local shop rather than just buying them online. Make sure you like them. I had owned a Korean casino some years past, and liked the look, liked the sound, never bonded with the neck profile. Unlike some of the other Epiphones these days, the back and sides of this are fully stained this dark mahogany red, as opposed to having that sunburst effect on the side, which kind of looks cheap to me. So of the Epiphones I've seen, this is the nicest as far as fit and finish. The bridge is much less thick and chunky than the fake Nashvilles that I'm used to on old Sheratons. It's got this split trapeze tailpiece, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it's what the originals had. This would be awesome with a Bigsby in its place. It's got these two little mini humbuckers, which really sound quite good. Again, I've played a lot of Epiphones over the years. I had a close friend who had an early 90s Sheraton. It weighed like 12 pounds. This one's probably 8-ish. It's not very heavy. It does have a solid block down the middle like a Sheraton should. It's just not a very dense guitar. It's not very heavy. It feels comfortable. All the trim's nice. The binding's well done. There's not a lot of rough spots in the F holes, which is common at this price. The pots all feel good. The knobs are pretty. They've got the clear top rather than the weird amber that you often find. I've had no electronics issues with this guitar. The pickups really sound nice. I don't have a lot of experience with tiny humbuckers like this, but they're kind of almost closer to a Tele than they are to a PAF. Maybe later I'll compare these with one of my Gibsons with more PAF style. But these are really nice. Almost some single coil clarity. The tuners are Grover Deluxes, which are probably the same ones used on the more expensive 50s and 60s Les Pauls and such, which I've not been a huge fan of at that price point, but for this price point they seem just fine. The gold plating doesn't seem to be in a hurry to flake off. Hearing this right now through this deluxe reverb reissue that I did my standard reliability upgrades to. I've got the volume at 3, the treble just over 5, the bass just over 6, the reverb just about at 3. This also has a mid-range pot added to the back, but right now it's at 10 o'clock, which is pretty much where a Deluxe Reverb lives and breathes. And the speaker in this amp is a WGS G12C, which is very similar to a Jensen C12N, replacing the C12K that came with the amp. It's got a lot of nice clarity to the highs and upper mids with the neck pickup. Doesn't have the lows that some humbuckers have, which is good and bad. And the bridge pickup is just very much like a Telecaster. Just a little thicker. And the middle position is just really sweet. This is a very unique voice for a guitar these days because it's very low output compared to most humbuckers. It sits right between a standard Gibson sound and a single coil sound. It doesn't really sound like P90s. It's its own thing, and it would be a fantastic rhythm and jazz and country instrument. I don't know that you'd want to do your Dokken riffs on it, but you know, maybe you would. It's got this scarf joint that a lot of the Epiphones have. It is a weak point, but you know, all Gibson headstocks are a weak point, whether it's a scarf joint or not. This nut is the one place where it's really not great. It looks like it's been off and back on again, I assume as a part of the repair in this area, but it is the factory nut. And while the nut heights are pretty good, it doesn't go sharp in the first couple of frets because the slots aren't too high. There's a lot of excess material above them, and this material kind of grabs the strings a little bit. So this guitar needs a little bit of further nut work, I think, to make it really reliable for stage use or studio use in terms of tuning stability long term. As I mentioned in the guitar stringing video yesterday, the nuts on the tuners were all loose. The screws holding the tuners on were all loose, but this guitar has been repaired. I don't know whether the guy who did the repair forgot to tighten them all up, though that is something that I see commonly on a lot of new Epiphones and sadly on new Gibsons. So if you get a new Epiphone or Gibson or any guitar really, especially the ones with the nuts that hold the tuners on tight, the first thing you should do is make sure that using the correct size socket, and it's often a 10 millimeter for most things these days, that you tighten them all. I don't mean crank them. You don't need to use any real torque. Just get them so that they won't turn anymore unless you were to use a lot of force. Because you can compress the headstock, you can break the headstock. You just don't want it to come loose and vibrate. When I first played this guitar, they were all vibrating, and all the screws were vibrating, and you'd play a note like this D, and just hear sympathetic vibrations happening all down here. And that doesn't just sound annoying, it robs the strings of energy. The one flaw this guitar really has, it's common to a lot of tune-o-matics, is that the retention wire that they use, which is a copy of what they did in the 50s and 60s, has come loose, and it is creeping over and is not really compressed by this screw. I could get in there and put some little kinks in that wire between the tuning holes, but honestly it's really just for looks on these. There are little clip-on washers that actually hold the screws in place so that string could really go away, that little bit of wire. It's just one little thing to vibrate down here. If you like the sound of a very traditional guitar and you're okay with very, very thin necks, a lot of people prefer that, and the fret height is good for you, These are well worth checking out. For the price, these are pretty amazing. It's amazing what you can get these days for very little money. Let me change to one of my Gibsons and keep all the settings the same. Let me do neck. Both. And bridge. So as you can hear, compared to the Burstbucker 1 and Burstbucker 2 that are in that Les Paul, a lot less low end, a lot less dark, a lot more mid-range focused. And some people will love each. I don't know what this sounds like with a Marshall. I don't have a Marshall here right now. I don't know how well this will react to feedback. I might find out a little bit with a different amp I've got here. But, I had an early 90s Sheraton, my friend did. We were in a band together, and those full-size humbuckers were terrible. They sounded awful. They were really microphonic. We changed them out to DiMarzios. I think he had an early Air Zone or something like that. Tone Zone. I think he had an early Tone Zone set up. And even those pickups fed back in that amp. We had to end up stuffing the guitar with T-shirts in the F-holes to get rid of the feedback on stage. And so by the end of that process, this 12-pound guitar was a 14-pound guitar. And the frets weren't anywhere like this, and certain frets he just couldn't bend on because he knew it wouldn't work. So he learned all the workarounds. So if you can't bend, you go. He was a really good guitarist, working around a really crappy guitar. We got some money together from playing. This is totally off the subject of this. And in 1992, he had saved up and he got a PRS CE, the bolt-on maple neck, just like Lifeson had at that time. It was gorgeous with I think it even had a 10-top with a whale blue, or 9-top if that's all they did on the CE. So the flame maple cap, just the peak of the new bolt-on PRS CE, and for the honeymoon period, he just thought it was the best thing ever. Then he played, I think it's a 64 SG Junior at a local shop in town, and he just couldn't stop playing that SG Junior. And so he traded that almost new whale blue PRS SE, not SE, CE, for a old SG Junior, 1P90, one volume, one tone, that's it. And he loved it. He still plays it to this day, as far as I know. We haven't spoken in a long time. Life happens. Before we went our different ways, we were close friends at the time, and he was such a great guitarist. I had a Telly at the time that I liked a lot, but he always sounded better playing that Telly than I did, so I just let him have that, because it obviously was his guitar, even if I was the one who bought it, mistakenly thinking it might be mine. That's how life happens with guitars and friends. When you can afford to put the guitar where it ought to be, I encourage everyone to do so, which probably means that a lot of my guitars should be given away. Fat chance, but aside from the very, very thin, tiny neck, which doesn't make my hand happy, this is a really nice guitar, not just for the price, but for the price, it's pretty staggering. the quality you get these days. So you'll be hearing this through a few different amps over the coming days, just because it's fun to use different signal generators. And this Deluxe is going to its home tomorrow, and I'm really pleased with the way it's sounding. It's sounding just as good as the 68 Pro Reverb on the floor next to it. And I've got like 4 of these to get through and a bunch of hot rods. The 47 microfarad axial F&Ts were out of stock for a long time, and I got a big bag of them in not too long ago. And similarly, I have 2 big bags of 22 microfarad F&Ts that I need to put in my parts bins. I got some hundreds in this one too, for a different amp. And I'm just kind of getting through all the amps that had to wait until the parts came in. It's been a fun couple of years. But I'm digressing, and I'm digressing, and I'm digressing. This is a lovely sounding guitar. And now that the strings are put on one of a few different proper ways, but one of the proper ways, the guitar stays in tune very nicely now. So I think the owner will be very, very happy with it.